Alright, the flow of the program, or the add-on for the event logging database tool that I'm making here. The rest of it explains somewhere else. So kicking it off, the init class starts. Pre-init says we need a little bit more priority and start up earlier. And that kicks off the fn init SQF. We check there's a server, otherwise we don't do anything. We don't need event handlers if it's a client. In fact, the code won't work if it is a client, so there's no point executing. We log into the ARMA 3 RTP if there are logging is turned on. We call to connect to database. So I'm over at the database here. A lot of this is unnecessary, except error checking really makes your debugging process go much smoother. The two most important parts is, first, we need to attach to a database. This part right there is the identifier that comes out of the server config. So you have that open still. Or the EXTDB3 dash conf ini right here. In my ARMA 3 server, I've got my ELDB mod, and I'm sharing space, or repackaging the EXTDB3, and he asked that we include our common license in there and include his licensing when we do so. So there's his exception. There's his full license right there. I'm going to go pretty slow comparatively, but I do want to put that up there that we are honoring his wishes there, so if anyone has any questions about that. And there's his request for this. So, unfortunately, his little repository is down right now. There's a backup on GitHub that somebody else put up with a wiki and all the troubleshooting and everything, but you need to match your information from right here. You can have multiple databases, and that's why I need that identifier in there. And make sure to change all that info once you do go on the internet. Otherwise, somebody will take advantage of your database and abuse you and get you a large bill. So, as you can see, we have a database it pulls out of, and we assign the database a variable name to use later on. And then we check that a result of 1 came back from calling that. This 9 right there is a system protocol check. Add databases explaining what it's doing. That's the database from that INI. There's our identifier. That's all that matters in that line, actually. And so once we call that, we never have to use the rest of this again. This check right here is just so that I can see what the result was and then proceed to the next step. You could theoretically just call this one and then call this one and be done. Nothing else. Because the EXTDB will hold that identifier for you until you need it again for the protocol. Then in here we're calling, once again, 9. Now we're doing an add protocol in this. We're using that identifier from before. We're telling it we want to do an SQL adaptation there, and we're making our own new name up here for an identifier. This is protocol. Once that protocol is set and you have that pretty name right there, you don't need any of the rest of this. But I continue down here and I check to make sure that the result was good from doing that. And I set it to true if it was. I go false and false if it wasn't. These drop out. Protocol check right there. This is interesting. This part right here drops the specific log of what would have gone wrong if there was an issue. This part does a generalized log telling you where you want to look. Same deal right here except for databases. And the flow of the program is it comes in here and executes this. If it's bad, it drops down. If the database add was right here is bad, it drops down to the else right there and does the database is bad, sets it to false, exits out, and returns false. If it was good, this accepts and moves on to setting the protocol. Then it checks the protocol. If it's good, it just says true. If it was bad, then it sets the false, records where, and then it skips this down here and returns false. So it returns us back to the init recorded right there. My error checking there is a little redundant. So in here I tell what add-on is going, that I'm repackaging the EXTDB3. It's firing from what file it's coming off of, and then the result, true or false. And it loads in right here for me. And then I tell it to log to the log files if that's turned on in your description.ext or your server.cfg. Now I call add the event handler, right? Kill log event handler. I wanted a better one, but for right now I made some compromises. I'm just going with the fast method of recording the unit and the killer. I'm not using instigator, which helps me solve a bunch of edge cases. We'll get into that later. I'm checking if it's a player that made the kill, because if it wasn't a player, why do we track it, right? So you could change that if you wanted, no problem. We're calling it exec insert or execute insert. It's kind of a sin to name it that. I should spell that out, but I didn't. So here we are. We got the unit and the killer we talked about. I am now calling get kill info. So I've got the kill info right here, and with the kill info I've got all my edge cases noted right here. We'll go into that more later, but for now we're taking the two pieces of information we got, which are both objects. One is the unit killed, the other is the player that did the killing. Because units that are AIs or bots will not have a Steam ID, we're putting a 1 right there if they don't have it. So I'm checking if it's a player and putting a 1 into that value there. Yeah. So next part up here is I am getting strings and I'm wrapping them in a single quote. This second string, or the second part right here, is a string that is the unit name that was killed. Then I get the side that it was killed from. The side does not work properly for some factions. There's 4 pages of wiki on the whole thing. It got to be too much troubleshooting it, so I just decided I was going to go with something simple. As long as they're on the same side, I'm going to get the information I need to make sure the player's not team killing or killing civilians, right? So now I'm recording the player that did the killing, and they'll always have a Steam ID. Yay! Once again, I could abstract this right here and have a function that would make it so I don't have this redundancy, but that takes too much time for the development process and troubleshooting. If I ever get to version 3 or 4, I'm going to do so, but it's not in the works right now. So once I've got the Steam ID, the name, and the side that they're on, this is all wrapped into an array, and I append an array that's coming back from this other function here. The reason why is I want a flat function. The Arma 3 engine does not have a flattened function built into it. Killzone Kid wrote a great one, but for simplicity I'm not using it yet. I'm calling the, you'll see here I'm using the identifier that we talked about from when we made the add-on. The ELDB is my add-on. FNC, and then the class name shows up there. So get locations. Get locations is going to record all this information I got there coming up. So I'm wrapping in a string because or single quote string for it all. I get the world name, mission, server name. Yay, right? Position is a 3-part array that's returned to me of floats. Same for, one for the killer, one for the killed. In here I do distance. It's the short method. There's a longer method for doing it that takes more computations. You only really need that when you're calculating things that are distance under a meter, like attaching a helmet to a player or a backpack. You don't want to be free floating or to be inside their body. So I use the short method of calculating distance there. Then after that, I create the array and shove in the flat values that we'll start it off at, and then I append in the three-part arrays of the killer position, or sorry, the killed position, killer position, and I do a pushback because it's a faster version of append for a single variable onto an array. Then I return it. Make sure you remember to return your result. If you don't, for this array setup stuff, you're going to get errors where it just doesn't run and you won't know why. One nice pro tip here is every time I get to a return section, I leave what should be a good set of values for that particular thing, so you can check out against it if you're a newer player or even a more experienced player that just forgot what it should look like. So I've got locations. I appended locations on a flat methodology, so the array is still flat. And now I'm going down to weaponry. Weaponry is where a lot of those edge cases I was talking about coming about. I probably spent my most time either in here or in the kill section. I spent a month just reading about the programming in Arma 3, and then probably a month between these two sections, really, the get kill info and the weaponry one. As of filming this, there is no way to just call for all of the turns that all the players are occupying and get the weapon off of them. You gotta pull some magic out of there to make this shit work. So I took some shortcuts, which is kind of a sin, but I documented them all up there to go back and take care of them. I also don't record if secondary explosions kill players, or if a player runs somebody over with a vehicle, or if a player makes a kill from a secondary turret, like a commander position. Anytime you have a mod where they're customizing vehicles with multiple players able to shoot at the same time is where you're going to start hitting that edge case. Also committed a sin. I could have extracted this part and made them into their own function, and then sub-extracted out the... you can see here, this part of the call is the exact same thing as this part of the call. Just they talk to different CFG files, basically. So for the weapons, if this check right here asks if the player's attached to anything, that's how you tell if you're in a vehicle. It's performant and the fastest way of checking. If this is null, comes back true, they are attached. The player is attached to a vehicle, and I need to call current weapon vehicle player, right? That gets me the weapon name or class, basically. And then I call for the pretty name. Right here, I get the text, which is the pretty name, out of the config file of CFGs using, you see weapon saved there, weapon name saved there. Gets me to my display name out of there. And then I wrap it in single quotes right there. Then I record the weapon name right there and shoot it through and wrap it in a string afterwards. This way I'm not calling, oops, should not have done that. Hold on one second here. This way I'm not calling current vehicle player or current weapon vehicle player twice. It saves a little bit of computation time and is faster. So mark true. I'd use true not because I couldn't derive it in the database later on, but because it makes some of my other calls much faster later on in another part of the program that you will not see here. So then I want to get the type of the vehicle, and I want to get the pretty name of the vehicle, and then I save or wrap the type of the vehicle in its own double quoted strings right there. So repeated the same process, but if not in a vehicle, after not in a vehicle, I get false and none wrapped in strings, single quote strings, for both the name and the class. This is a very specific order I have it in here, so that I can take some shortcuts when I go to insert this into the database. I do a result string join to test out in the system chat for whatever, and you can only do that if you are running single player or the Eden editor multiplayer version there. So This will return us back to get kill info, and the only thing we do there is we push back time afterwards. Once again, I left in my logging so I could log the results out, and I have recorded the output that I expected into a little string for you in case you need it, and for myself if I case come back to this in a couple months. So now I'm back in execute insert, and I'm going to be calling the format. I saved the result there, and I shot the result into execute or format insert. So I'm in format insert here. Here's the shortcut I was talking about earlier. I set this up as a string literal, so I have to detect if the it's not a player being killed. Because it's string literal, I can't just remove killed UID in a very easy way out of there without doing some sort of extra function to drop that first part, which is fine because it's in the beginning and I don't have to do any string matching or anything else, and it's pretty trivial, but it's still extra work to be done. Data is the array given to me by the execute or gather get kill info, I should say. And I do that same string join we talked about earlier into value list here. So now I've got field list and value list, and I spit them in here and here, and they pop out right there and right there into a fully formed SQL insert. And that SQL result is recorded right there so you can see it. And that is returned to the exec insert. Now right here I'm doing the number 2 for asynchronous, which is a really good thing to do if you are working in scheduled and unscheduled environments, which is a whole nother section in Bohemian Interactive's wiki that you're going to have to read if you want more information on. You don't really need it. The gist of it is this won't tie up the system, and the 2 tells it that even though it's not tying up the system, I still want to return if the result was good or bad. Then I go to that my protocol identifier we were using in the DB Connect. You remember that identifier we made there? So, and then this is the query result being tagged in there. It's now recorded right there, and it's ready to be, it's now recorded right there, and it's ready to be spit into the database function. Before you call this or try and test it like this, highly recommend you take the result from the previous section in the format, and you copy that, you pop over to your SQL workbench, and you insert it in there, and you give it a little run. And down there it says everything was good. If I break that and I run it, nice error message going to be coming up right there. It tells me where did the error start. It started right near test server, so I go back up here and I search for test server, and right before that I'm like, oh, what is this weirdness? Why do I have a single one hanging out? I need to chop that out, or I need to do 2 of them and a comma, which will make it work. Yay! So once I know that's working, I'm back over in, we said we were returning back to the exec section, exec insert. So we're calling that should run. We return the result just so we know, and that's going to spit it back up into the event handler. Yay! Right, we're basically done. You could record this if you want, but the important part is it returns so we know we're done. The semicolon executes, the if statement drops, the event handler drops, and the program closes off faster than, or the script closes off faster than it would if you just let it hang. So that is the flow of the program. And we are finished here. Once again, thank you to Ronco for putting together EXTDB3. Thank you to the guy over at Last Resort for doing the CFG scripts that I used in here, and I'm going to have their links somewhere up in the YouTube video when I put that stuff up.